Hey everybody, my name's Jeff Schneider, and welcome to episode 2 of Questions for Jeff. Now, before we get started, I just want to let everybody know that we're getting these questions from a couple different places. First and foremost, I get my questions from my patrons on my Patreon page. Those cats get first dibs. So if you want to ensure that your question gets answered, you can feel free to become a patron and leave your question there the next time we do a Q&A. The other place where I've gotten a lot of questions is my Instagram page, which is right here. Facebook and Twitter work great too. Just make sure to use the hashtag #QuestionsForJeff. All right, let's get to the show. So we're going to start off with a question from one of my patrons on my Patreon page. This is from Franklin San Giovanni. And the question is, what is harmonic rhythm and why should I know it exists? That's a great question. Harmonic rhythm refers to how fast the chords or the harmony is moving. So if you have a chord per measure, that's the harmonic rhythm. If you have 2 chords per measure, that's the harmonic rhythm for that particular measure. It's how fast the chords are going by. That's all it is. It's nothing too more complex than that. We'll go right to the next question. This is Ronnie Alexander Melo Acosta. And the question is, oh, this is a long one. Let me see if I can summarize. Basically, his issue is that on YouTube and online, he's finding a bunch of random videos, but there's not really a sequential order to them that carries you through from point A to point B to point C and so on. So I don't know exactly what it is that you want to play or what instrument you play, or what kind of music you're into, but I do have a course coming out. And it's about, well, it's a 2-part course. One part is about piano voicings, and not just piano, but any kind of chord voicings and arranging. And then the second part is about creating chord progressions. It's going to go from beginner to advanced level and be very all-encompassing and take you on that journey, that path that's much more logical than just a bunch of random YouTube videos out there. So I think that's going to be really valuable, and I'll give you guys updates about it as it progresses. Because we're close, we're almost there. Anyway, I'm going to keep going here. Jack McCabe, who's a big patron, asks, how do you get the Dilla drum groove and how do you play Keys Rhodes over it? Jack's referring to the J Dilla groove. I talked a little bit about this in my previous video, and it's essentially it's a sort of a laid back drum groove that, like Jack says, is both swung and straight at the same time in terms of the 8th note. So there's not one way to do this, but one of the common ways of doing it is by playing a straight 8th on the kick and snare drum. So for instance, here's the beat. You'd have boom, snare, or rather kick, snare, kick, kick, snare, kick, snare, kick, kick, snare. Nothing too complicated about that. Then when you add the hi-hat though, you're gonna do something that's a bit more swung, which is like, well, it doesn't have to be completely swung, but it can be something like dun 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 dun. So there's a little bit of a swing feel there, and when you combine it all, obviously I'm not going to sing it all at the same time, but when you combine the swung hi-hat with the straight kick and snare, you get a little bit of a rub where the kick and the hi-hat don't line up like they normally would, and it sounds pretty cool. It sounds kind of laid back, and in addition to that sort of more formulaic explanation of the groove, I think it's a feel. I saw a video of Questlove from The Roots talking about this groove, and he certainly has to emulate some of that when he was playing with D'Angelo on, if you listen back to Voodoo, he's doing this groove where it's very much laid back, and he describes it as sort of playing drunk, where it's a little bit sloppy, it's behind the beat, things aren't lining up the way they normally would, and it creates a really, really cool effect. I feel like I've talked about this before, but anyway, the best way to get this stuff is really by just listening and listening and listening and listening and imitating and playing along and recording yourself and listening back to see if you actually got it right. And that is especially true for accompanying these drum grooves with piano parts and Rhodes parts and bass parts. There's not one way to do it. It's a matter of listening to what other people have done, seeing if you can imitate that, and seeing if you can put your own spin on it to get that sound. One other thing I'll say about playing behind the beat is that if everybody in the band plays behind the beat, then nobody's really playing behind the beat because it's just essentially playing at a slower tempo. So, regarding your question about what the bass and the keys do, well, somebody has to be keeping that beat. so that you get the effect of behind the beat. So, maybe the drums are laying way back and the bass is going to be keeping a little bit more of a down the middle tempo. I would really just listen and listen and listen and try to pay as close attention as you can to the rhythm section. How are the bass and drums interacting? What is the Rhodes doing? This is called deep listening or active listening, where you're not just passively, hearing what's going on. You're really focusing in on different elements and concentrating on them for maybe the entire track or an entire record. It's a really effective exercise and a really educational way to listen to music. So here's an exercise for everybody who, maybe you're not interested in the Dilla groove, but you just want to, take advantage of active or deep listening. Get a record that you really like. It can just be one track, and throw it on with some headphones and just listen to one instrument for the entire track. Just listen to the drums or just listen to the bass and only focus on that one instrument all the way through. It's actually kind of challenging to do, to stay that focused, especially if it's on an instrument that's not as much in the forefront, like like bass or something like that. Supermaster Yoda asks, which do you think is more important, reading music or playing by ear? And do you think a jazz musician can do without one of them? I would definitely say playing by ear is more important. Reading music is definitely important, but it's just like any language. You can read a language, but that's not really going to get you that far. You need to be able to speak the language. And in order to speak the language, you need to hear the language. Just like when babies learn to talk, they don't, well, there's my baby right now, but you don't have to, the babies aren't learning to read first. They're listening and then they're speaking. Then they learn to read. So if you're going to do anything, I would say, I got to take care of this. The bottom line is we listen to music. We don't look at music. So these are going to be more important than these. Okay, next question comes from Breno Roca 96 or Breno Roca 96. How do you think one can make it in music in a big city like New York or LA coming from somewhere else? Well, first of all, you have to define what make it means. Does that mean becoming super famous so everybody knows you? Does that mean being able to make a living? Is it somewhere in the middle? You have to define what success is for you before you try to achieve it, because it can mean anything. It doesn't really matter where you come from. I think if you want to try to make it in New York or LA, then it's really a matter of hustling, right? And never letting up. You have to be extremely persistent, and you have to persevere. And just like with anything else, it's not just like with anything else. Trying to sort of make a statement in a big city like New York or LA is a difficult thing to do, because everybody's here trying to do the same thing. So you have to find a way to stand out. You have to find a way to be different, but you also have to be really good. So it's not just a matter of hustling in terms of like networking or meeting people or whatever. It's also a matter of practicing your ass off so that you can be as good as you possibly can. And then you'll have a shot at making it in a big city like New York or LA. Okay, next question. Did you start on piano or saxophone, and how has either instrument helped you become better at the other? It's a great question, Alex. This is from Alex Chelson. I started technically on the piano, just kind of tinkering, messing around, and then I started saxophone later than that. Piano was about 5 or 6, and then saxophone was like 10 or 11. So look, piano, I think everybody should be playing the piano. It's an amazing instrument to learn how theory works and harmony. Obviously, you can see all the keys. They're laid out very linearly in a way that makes a lot of sense. And you don't really need any technique to make sound. You just push the key down. Piano has definitely informed my saxophone playing because, well, look, for a while when I was learning saxophone scales on saxophone, I was just kind of picturing the piano in my mind's eye, and then that would really help me figure out what the notes were, or arpeggiating chords. I would picture the piano. I don't know how the saxophone has necessarily helped my piano playing. Besides, I've amassed a lot of vocabulary on the saxophone in terms of like 2-5-1 lines or whatever, and so I've learned to transfer those over to the piano, and that's been helpful. So I guess that's how it goes the other way around. Here's a question from Anthony Tam 24. Do you think it's crazy to want to become a professional saxophone player that only plays classical music? It's a good question. To be honest, classical music on the saxophone is not my forte. I don't really listen to it. I don't really play it. That being said, there are 7 billion people in the world, and I'm sure some of them like classical saxophone. So I don't think it's crazy to do anything if you're passionate about it, because that's at the end of the day, well, it's not just being passionate. You have to know, if you want to be professional anything, professional means you have to make a living doing it, or at least make some money doing it. So I think you can probably make money doing just about anything. You just have to know how to market it the right way and, sell it the right way. So yeah, if you're really passionate about playing classical saxophone, then I don't think it's a crazy idea. There are so many people out there that you don't need to be like as famous as Beyonce to make it as a classical saxophonist. Having said all that, I remember somebody told me when I was growing up, it wasn't to me directly, but it was to like a group of students, something along the lines of, if you're wondering about whether you should be a musician when you grow up, the answer is, well, if you have to ask the question, then it's probably a no. That means that if you're wondering about it too much, then it might not be for you. And the reason for that is you have to be all in. You have to give it your whole heart. And there's really no room for doubt there. I mean, running your own business is hard enough, and then having it be in the music space is even more difficult. So you really have to be all in. So if you have to ask the question, sometimes that can be an indication that maybe it's not the right choice. I don't think that's a hard and fast rule, but it's certainly something to consider. Okay, here's a question from NBA Stuck. Hi, Jeff. What do you think of the common claim that learning music theory is a distraction from feeling the music? For example, when improvising. Are you ever worried about losing the balance between playing complex music and something that you feel is groovy? Thank you. Thank you. That's a really good question. And it is something that I think about. When you learn theory, you run the risk of it overshadowing what you actually are hearing and would play naturally. And so you have a lot of people playing scales and arpeggios that are maybe technically correct in the theoretical sense, but don't make any sense musically. Because look, it's a lot easier to remember 7 notes in a scale than it is to remember what the third sounds like over a major chord. That's much more difficult. It's much more abstract. So you have to be careful there. And I think it's important to learn theory, but then when you go to play, you have to kind of forget about it and do your best to play by ear. And maybe the theory can support what you hear and help you figure out what it is that you're hearing, but the theory can't drive what you're playing. And some ways to help you get into that zone, I think, is to think more rhythmically, because rhythm is something that we certainly feel, and it's not something we think about too much. When it comes to scales and arpeggios, that's something that we're thinking about a lot, because it's specific notes. We're calling up the names of notes in our head, but with rhythm, it's, we feel rhythm. It's a little bit more primal, I think. Also, I've said this before, but singing is a really effective way to make sure that the ear is in charge and not the theory side of things. Because if you're singing, then it's going to be authentic. So you don't have to have good tone quality with your voice. You just have to be able to sing accurate pitches and then figure out how to play what you sing. That's all there is to it there. All right, next question is from Richard DK62. As a professional, how do you feel about learning and using licks? Do you always make an effort to play solely original material in your solos, or is it okay to use cool licks you find in a transcribed solo? This is a really good question too. Licks are something that I've talked about a lot before. I used to do a Lick of the Day series on my Instagram page. So if you want to dig back into the archives, you can probably find them. And I do licks on this channel on YouTube. So it's not something that I shy away from. You have to watch out for licks though, because a lot of the times they can be cliche, and essentially you're playing somebody else's idea. Now, that's not always a bad thing, because by looking at other people's lines, you can learn from them. And that's how I think licks should really be used. You want to understand what makes the lick work, why it is that you like it, and then take that information and make your own music. And maybe it'll sound similar to what came before, but you also have the opportunity to create something new. So that's how I like to use licks. It's just like when you learn a language, right? You learn how to make these sentences like C spot run. And you're never going to actually write C spot run later on in life, but you learn how nouns work and verbs work that way by analyzing these sentences that have come before, and then you create your own. So I look at licks as material from which to learn, and then you go on to make your own stuff. Now, have I used licks in solos that, I'm kind of just quoting verbatim? Sure, I think everybody does, but it's not something that I strive to do. It's, I think having a vocabulary of lines to fall back on in a pinch can be useful and give you confidence to go out there and maybe try some other things that you wouldn't normally try. But I'm not setting out to like play other people's lines. I think it's, I'd rather go out there and play me and be as authentic as possible. Okay, we got a question here from Sammy Gagao. What made you decide you wanted to play music for a living? I don't know if there was an exact impetus, like a specific time and place where I made that decision. But when I was in, I think as early as like middle school, I started practicing. I don't even think it was saxophone or piano. I think it was guitar. I was practicing guitar like as much as I possibly could. I would come home from school and just play guitar through the night. And then, you know, I started practicing saxophone a lot in high school. Same kind of thing, practicing every single second that I could get my hands on the horn. And at that point, since I was spending all of my time doing it, I basically thought to myself, well, I better figure out a way to make this work, because if not, I'm not sure what else I'm going to do. So I guess that was the point I made my decision. Okay, Connor J. Williams 94 asks, what brand baby do you use? I use a Schneider custom series. Yeah. Okay, Luminati asks, what's a good way to network with other musicians? This is a good question, because networking is really important if you want to be a musician. You have to know people, just like, you know, that's what they say about show business. It's who you know. And to a certain extent, it's the same with music. So here's the thing. When you want to network with other musicians, there's a couple of things you have to do. You have to go where the people are. You have to go where the musicians are. That could be a gig, somebody's jam session, a music school. Go where the people are. You have to talk to the people. So you have to have the, you know, the guts to go up and strike up a conversation, or, you know, if it's a jam session, go up and play, and that can kind of open the door to some conversation in a more natural way, perhaps. And once you open up that conversation, you know, you don't want to be overwhelming and you know, ask, okay, can I be on your gig? Obviously, you don't want to ask to marry somebody on the first date. So you have to romance it a little bit, and that's a matter of just keeping in touch. You know, get somebody's email address, check in every now and again, build relationships that way. Play the long game. Don't try to close on the first date or the first jam session. That's my advice. All right, I'm going to take one more question from Instagram. Actually, I'm going to do two more questions. The first one, a lot of people have been asking for like a list of neo-soul artists, and people have provided comments to those comments with some really good suggestions. Look, if you guys are familiar with like Spotify, it's a good resource to search for an artist that you know is like a neo-soul artist, like D'Angelo or Erykah Badu or Jill Scott or somebody, and then click on the button that says related artists and just see who pops up. That's a really good way to find out other musicians in that genre. And then you can click on that person and then do the same thing. Go to related artists, and you can find all these different people that you wouldn't be able to find normally. Okay, we're going to do one more question. This one's from Irvin Nicholas. It's a little, I don't know if it's a serious question, but I'm going to take it. The question is, do you like Taylor Swift? And my answer is yes. The reason for that is because I listened to that record, 1989, a bunch, not really listening to Taylor Swift specifically, but I was listening to the production. I was listening to the mix, the way it was mastered, all of those things, because I want to be able to make a record that sounds as polished as a commercial pop record that has, you know, the best people working on it, you know, with all the money behind it. Like if I can get that sound in terms of making my productions as tight and getting the mix as polished as the record that Taylor Swift comes out with, then I feel like I'm more confident in my ability. That doesn't mean I'm going to go out and make that kind of music for myself. There are a lot of times when I have to make music in genres that I wouldn't normally write in. You know, for a lot of the commercial projects that I do, I have to write in genres that, you know, that I wouldn't normally be composing in. But the thing is, when I listen to that music in the same way that I was talking about before with the deep listening, with the active listening, I get really interested because I hear things I didn't hear on the first listen, and then I'm like, wow, there was actually some thought put into that. How do they get the kick drum to sound like that? How do they get the guitar parts to layer in such a way? If you ever see something or hear something and you're not into it, or maybe you judge the book by its cover and you don't even bother giving it a fair shot. My theory is that if you try to do it yourself, you'll appreciate it in a whole nother way. You realize, well, it's not as easy as you thought, or it's not as simple as you thought. So I gain appreciation for other people's work that way. And I think it's a smart thing for other people to do too. It doesn't mean I'm going to listen to Taylor Swift after I make this video, but it does mean that I've learned something from listening to her records. So I'll leave it at that. I got to get a drink. I hope you guys enjoyed this this questions for Jeff episode 2. I don't know if you could hear my dog Maybelline breathing the entire time, or my son with his random cries. But I hope you got something out of these answers. Thank you to everybody who submitted questions for today. Sorry I didn't get to all of them, but I hope this was valuable, and I look forward to the next one. We'll do it again next week. Thank you all for watching, and see you in the next video.